Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back, my awesome moms. Last week, we talked about how most of the time, the thing we're missing in our life is structure, and that's what's usually causing our burnout. We talked about how we spend years putting out fires throughout the early years and rushing from one kind of emergency to the next, never really stopping to ask if this is what we want and whether this is how it's supposed to be. And I remember thinking about that a lot in my early motherhood journey. I want to thank each one of you for sharing your thoughts, for those of you who wrote in and shared your sentiments, whether you read it on Substack, whether you read it in your email, or you listened to the podcast, that it really resonated. Some of you sent in the crying emoji because you felt so seen. So I want to thank you for that. I appreciate every single DM. But this week, I want to talk about something else. Some of you are now sitting in a different kind of discomfort after feeling seen, and not the kind that comes from being overwhelmed as a mom, but the kind that comes from feeling exposed. And if that's you, if you felt something loosen in you last week, whether it resonated with you or you felt validated or you felt like someone knows what you're going through, and there's a little bit of an unsettled feeling along with a comforted feeling, this episode is for you. Because today I want to talk about something that a lot of us say we deal with and we feel, and it's almost as if I hear it in every mom conversations majority of the time, and it's this feeling stuck. If you are in that phase of life where you feel stuck where you are, I want to let you know that feeling you're describing is not always being stuck. I mean, it could be, but beneath stuckness sometimes is simply hesitation. And so today I want to talk about what your sense of hesitation that's underlying your stuckness is actually protecting you from. Because the truth of the matter is that when we think we're stuck and underneath that is simply hesitation, it's not because we're hesitating because we don't have enough time, money, energy, clarity, knowledge. And although those can be real constraints, nobody's dismissing that. These constraints are real. But what I've noticed, both in my own life and in the lives of the mothers I support, is that hesitation shows up right after clarity. It took me a long time to observe and understand this in my own life. Hesitation shows up after clarity, but most of us think it should show up before. Clarity should be present before hesitation. That's how we normally operate. So I'm going to share snippets of my life where this showed up. One of them being, I remember after having my second child, I was really out of shape. Like going up the stairs would knock me out. And I remember saying, Iman, this is not cool. Like I had my first 3 kids in my 20s and now I'm in my 30s. But in my 20s, I was like, how am I feeling like a 50-year-old? So I recall at the time I was a stay-at-home mom. My second born was only about maybe 6 or 7 months old. I remember going to the grocery store one night and there was a gym in the grocery store and they had a promo. Something in me said, let's just go in and check out this promo. I go in and of course I met with a personal trainer. It was one of those pivotal moments that you just don't forget in your life. So anyways, the personal trainer, obviously she's pitching me their deal and she is literally describing everything I'm feeling. And she is painting a picture of 12 weeks of working with her, how my life is going to change, how I'm going to transform. Everything she said landed for me. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. I felt heard, seen, validated, moved, inspired, all the things. And the moment it came to the payment to actually show my commitment to this thing I'm desiring, what happened? I felt stuck. I knew I wanted it, but underneath that stuckness was hesitation. Thinking, am I really ready to commit to this? This is not just a matter of money commitment. It's a time commitment, a physical commitment. And I hesitated. I'm sure you can relate. Moments where you feel seen, you feel understood, you recognize yourself in something. You think, yes, this is exactly what I've been feeling, what I'm looking for. This is what I've been going through. And then you pause. Now, when you pause, you're not doing it because you don't understand the thing, right? It's because you actually do. And here's the part I didn't pick up on for a long time. Understanding means you can no longer pretend you don't know what needs to be shifted in you. Ouch. And that feeling is far worse than just thinking you're hesitating because you need to think things through, or that you need to consult someone, or that you just need more time to think about it, or you need to save up more money, right? All the excuses we tell ourselves. And although I hesitated, I told her that I'm going to do it. But I also want to take you back to another story that maybe you can also relate to. In my early motherhood journey, I was drowning in so much information of parenting. I was hopping from one parenting account to another. One time I'm thinking, oh, I'm a conscious parent. Another time, oh, maybe I'm a respectful parent, or maybe I'm a gentle parent. But I still was confused and dissatisfied. And I thought my problem was that I hadn't found the right method yet, like the right calling of parenthood. I thought I was hesitating because I needed more clarity, more certainty, more proof, more evidence that whatever approach I was going to choose would actually work. Now, in hindsight, I know this now, that the reason why I was hesitating was because the way I've been surviving up until that point, or the way I'd been managing everything, gave me something. And you know what that something was? It was a sense of control. So even though I didn't like how exhausted I was in my early parenting journey, even though I was doing everything right, I still wasn't getting the results I was hoping for, or I still wasn't living in the way that I was hoping for. Even though I was falling apart inside every day, I still stuck with it because it was familiar. If you looked at it from the outside, you would say, man, this mom is surviving. I was definitely on survival mode, having 3 kids at a certain point. But why was I attached to this? It's because it was familiar. Why wasn't I open to new ways of being, of parenting, of existing? It's because survival mode was what I was familiar with. Maybe you are the same. Right now, you're probably in survival mode as well. And you're like, I don't know another way. And although there are other ways of living, you tell yourself, but I'm stuck. Underneath your stuckness and hesitation is that this is familiar to you. You know how to operate from where you are right now. You know what's expected of you. You know how to perform competence. Even when you're barely holding it together, you know how to show up as the mom who has it together. That version of you gives you something. She gives you a sense of identity, a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging. And when someone comes along and says, hey girl, you don't have to do it this way, you feel threatened and it maybe feels dangerous to you. In other words, what they're really saying is the identity you built to survive might need to shift. And this is something that is so common in human beings. There are seasons in life where we will be in a state of survival. But sometimes even after we come off that phase of survival, why are we still stuck in that identity? It's because it's familiar. And the brain and the body know that if something is familiar, it will stick with it and choose it over and over again because your mind and body prioritize safety. Not what's good for you, but instead what feels safe. So again, when someone says there's a different way, it's not because you can't handle change. Girl, you handle change every single day. Your children are constantly changing, constantly growing, constantly requiring different things from you. But this kind of change is different, right? Because this kind of change requires you to look at yourself and say, what happens if I let go of this identity? What happens if I stop performing this version of me? Who am I really? If I stop being the mom who has all the answers, if I stop being the mom who can manage everyone and everything, if I stop being the competent mom, if I stop equating my exhaustion with my devotion to my family, then who in the world am I? This is what I mean when I say hesitation is identity protection. The truth is, you're not waiting for more information. You're not waiting for the perfect time or waiting for life to get easier. All the excuses you tell yourself because I'm also guilty as charged. You're waiting because you can sense that making a different choice would change who you are. And that, my friend, is terrifying. I see this especially with Muslim mothers who are trying to protect their kids' Islamic identity while living in a world that's pulling them in every other direction. We tell ourselves we're hesitating to change or to shift because we need to research more. We need to find the perfect Islamic school. We need to find the perfect parenting methodology. We need to find the perfect curriculum. We need to find the perfect balance. And when I say perfect, I'm not talking about an unrealistic ideal. I'm talking about perfect for you, perfect for your family. We need to find the perfect balance, right? Between deen and dunya, or between protecting our kids and not sheltering them too much, or between being present and also being productive. But what we're really doing here is we're preserving a version of ourselves that feels responsible. The version that doesn't rest until everything is figured out. The version that knows exactly what she wants for her kids. The version that other people see as having it together. The version that equates self-abandonment and self-sacrifice to taking care of her family, to providing value for her family. That version of you, I'm telling you right now, it's not sustainable. And a lot of you know my burnout story, but I'm not telling you this from theories I read in books. This is my actual lived experience. Being this version of a mom led me to a hospital bed one day. All of this to say is that there is a solution, and the solution is so simple. It is literally going back to the basics and going back to your origin. And it is going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and parenting and showing up from a place of submission. It is living a life from a place of tawakkul and full trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I know you probably thought I'm going to give you something more fancy, something that sounds eloquent from a latest self-help book, but I'm not, because I'm here to share with you the ultimate truth and the solution that also worked for me. Submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything we do in our life requires us to release the illusion that we have control, or that we can control everything, that we can protect our children from every possible harm. If we just research enough, plan enough, manage enough, it requires us to trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more capable than our ability to control. And you might know that in your head, but it might be harder to live and to embody and to practice. The reason why it's hard is because release feels like giving up, doesn't it, at first? Release feels like we're not trying hard enough. Release feels like we're being irresponsible, especially for those of us who grew up in homes where we learned that love equals sacrifice, where we learn that if you're not struggling, then are you even doing anything right? Where we learn that ease is suspicious and rest is lazy. How many of us are incapable of resting? We carry those voices and we don't even realize it. We operate from them every single day and we don't acknowledge it. And those voices tell us that if we stop managing everything, if we stop being the glue that holds everyone and everything together, everything will fall apart. I can't tell you How many times I've heard this exact statement from mothers. So here's where we're going to go back to what I said last week, that the early years demands your leadership. When you see yourself as a leader who submits to Allah, it means you have clarity, and clarity feels vulnerable. The biggest misconception we have, we think that leadership means control. That's not true leadership. True leadership is having crystal clarity. And sometimes that feels vulnerable because when you are clear about what matters, you no longer have the option to hide. You no longer have the ability to say, I'll figure it out when I have time. You no longer avoid the fact that you've been choosing to stay in survival mode because it feels safer than stepping into your leadership role. So you have to make a choice, and choices reveal what you value and who you are. This is why many of us wait. We're waiting for that perfect opportunity. We're waiting for that perfect methodology. We keep waiting. And essentially, this kind of waiting is coming from the fear of releasing control. We're afraid if we stop managing the optics, if we stop performing this sense of competence, if we stop trying to keep everyone happy and everything great, we're all going to fall apart. And I'm going to be honest with you. Maybe it will. But maybe what falls apart is the version of you that wasn't meant to last. Maybe what falls apart are the things that didn't matter in the first place. The thing that made the biggest difference in my life. The reason why I overhauled our entire life since the last 4 years was because I knew in a moment that the way we were living wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't aligned with what we valued. I knew that we needed to be more intentional. I knew that we needed to create a home that actively fostered the Islamic identity. I knew that the environment around us had to change. And I knew that if I didn't step into that role of being the leader that I was meant to be, nothing was going to change. And I would still wear my survival hat as a badge of honor because it just felt so familiar. It was what I knew up until then in my motherhood journey. So when I came to this realization, this wasn't just a passive hope of one day it would develop. I knew that I had to actively change something right away. Knowing and doing are two different things. And a lot of what I hear in my mom circles is that moms know what they need to do. It's just the doing that becomes difficult. Because doing something about it would mean admitting that everything I was doing wasn't matched to the reality that I wanted. And sometimes, to some of us, it can feel like failure, right? It would mean that I'd have to release the version of myself that I thought I could figure it out on my own, that I was going to do it all by myself. And sometimes that brings a sense of weakness, especially for those of us who don't like to feel weak. It would mean trusting that Allah's guidance was far more important than my ability to get to a point of certainty through my own doing and my own research and my own practice. And sometimes that can feel like giving up control. So I didn't change right away. I hesitated. I kept consuming content. I kept listening to everyone and their mama about how the ideal version of motherhood should look like. I kept trying new strategies. I kept telling myself, once I have more time, or once the kids are a bit older, or once we're more settled, then I'm sure I'm going to figure it out then. But now in hindsight, I realized that I was actually protecting an identity that felt familiar. The identity of the competent mom, the identity of the woman who doesn't need help, right? She's an alpha. The identity that looked good to everyone else, even though it was exhausting me inside. It wasn't until life confronted me that I stopped hesitating. It was just a matter of zooming out of my life and looking at it through a bird's eye view and choosing to be different. In a moment's time, all it took was just a shift of, I'm ready to be this person. I'm ready to hang the apron on this survival, self-sacrificing version of me. And it wasn't because I found a better coach or mentor or tip. It wasn't because I found certainty all of a sudden. It was actually when I admitted that the way I was living was just not compatible with who I needed to be and where I wanted to go in my motherhood. I chose to release the version of myself that thought managing everything meant loving my family well. I chose to admit that I needed Allah's guidance more than anything. I chose to let go of Instagram to be a voice in my life. I chose to trust that clarity was more important than certainty. And that shift, that release, I have to say, was the hardest thing I've ever done. I specifically remember when I did it, but it was hard. It was almost as if you're grieving a version of you that existed for so long. When I made that shift, it changed how I saw myself. It changed how I showed up as a mother. It changed what I valued and what I was willing to release and what I was willing to advocate for. And that kind of change doesn't happen through accumulation, guys. It doesn't happen through collecting more things, collecting more strategies or reading more books or following more expert accounts. It happened through release, through letting go of what no longer was serving me, so that ultimately you can make room for the version of you that's meant to lead, so that person can finally emerge. And unfortunately, what I see some moms do is that they think they can have the best of both worlds, where you think you can hold on to who you are now and still be the version of you that you want to be, that ideal version or the highest self version of you, when in reality, it doesn't work that way. One must go. And as long as you're waiting, the longer that version of you will take to show up. So if you're listening to me today and you feel a little exposed and you feel a little unsettled, maybe you feel called, maybe you feel seen, and now you don't know what to do with yourself, I want you to know this. You are probably one of the few people who are on the threshold of major changes. And let me tell you, thresholds are uncomfortable. They're supposed to be. Because what's on the other side isn't just a better way or a strategy or a better tip. It's not just a better routine to motherhood or a better way of living. What's on the other side, my friend, is a different version of you, a version that leads, a version of you that's anchored instead of scattered, a version of you that trusts Allah more than anything in your life, a version of you that sees a much better life for herself, a more aligned life for herself, a more joyful life for herself, a more fulfilling journey for herself. Because our time on this earth is limited. And this version of you will only arrive through release. So I'm here to tell you again and again that you don't need more information or more noise, more experts in your ear. You don't need more certainty. You need more trust. You need to notice what you'd have to release if you stopped hesitating. Because the truth of the matter is, waiting doesn't mean you're being careful all the time. Sometimes it means you're preserving something you built to survive. And let me tell you, preservation has a cost. It costs you the version of yourself that's anchored, grounded, and clear about what matters. And I'm not saying waiting is always wrong. Sometimes patience is a virtue. Sometimes discernment takes time. But what I am saying today is that if you're waiting, ask yourself, what are you protecting? Not what you're waiting for, but what are you protecting by waiting? Because most of the time, we're not protecting ourselves or our children. We're not protecting our family. We're not even protecting our values. What we're protecting is an identity that was never meant to last forever. And releasing that identity doesn't mean everything falls apart. It just means the version of you that was never meant to last finally has permission to rest. And what rises in that place is usually clarity. I know this week's episode is a little on the heavier side, so I'm going to end it here. And if something in you shifted while listening, I want you to sit with that. Don't rush it. Don't fix it. Don't try to figure it out. Don't immediately open Instagram to find an answer. Just notice it. Notice what comes up for you. Notice what feels uncomfortable. Notice what you wanted to push away in the first place. Because that discomfort isn't an enemy. Remember, it could be a threshold. And you get to decide if you're ready to cross that bridge. I'll be back here next Monday, inshallah, to continue this conversation. Until then, take care of yourself. Take care of your heart. And remember, hesitation isn't the enemy. It's protecting you from something you built when you had no other choice. The question is, are you ready to let go? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.